what's the one thing we will all experience?
It's pretty numb, but at the same time, you are in pain.
This film is about grief.
Sometimes I can completely forget what's happened.
We'll ask what grief is.
Grief is such a normal process.
And what it might look like. Why you don't have to pretend you're fine.
That means I'm insecure, I'm neurotic, I'm emotional.
That's the best description of the word fine I've ever heard.
And we'll find out what might help if you or somebody you know is grieving.
Like, just be honest. Just say, no pressure. But if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here.
This week on Like Minds, we're talking about grief, the very normal, natural feeling you get when somebody you love dies. You've probably lost somebody. I have. And in fact, nearly everybody in the world has. It's definitely awful, and it's something that really affects our lives, but it can be really difficult to talk about. This is Kate and Jeff.
Here he comes. Up you go.
Jeff hasn't been well.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a psychotherapist and I work with people after a bereavement when somebody important to them has died.
We have so many words for passing away,
Kicking
being
the bucket,
dead,
pushing up the daisies, yep, all of that.
popping clogs.
Yep.
What's the best word to use though?
Dead means dead. The best word to use is died, dead. It is what it is. Death is part of life. It's going to happen. We're all going to feel sad. We're all going to miss people. We will all die, and that's okay. So the way I try to describe grief is imagine this is you, and everything about your life is contained within this circle. This is you. And when a bereavement happens, there isn't an area of your life that isn't affected by that grief. It touches every part of you. And what we used to think is that over time, that became smaller and disappeared. But the thinking now is that actually this stays the same, but our life grows around it. And we have lots of other things that happen in our lives now, but this stays within us. And on certain times, anniversaries, birthdays, Christmases, whatever, you dip straight back into it. And then when that anniversary or whatever passes, you remember this part of your life again. I guess what I believe now is that this doesn't stay as dark and black inside us forever, and that somehow it changes shape and becomes a little bit more fuzzy, although it still remains there.
So you don't move on.
You just
you
learn
don't
to
get over it.
No, you just learn to have it as part of your life.
So why are we on about? Please, Ryan. In January.
Why,
It's lovely though.
why wouldn't we burn it? It's February.
Oh, is it February?
It's like the second, yeah.
Ryan's mum and dad both died when he was a teenager.
I didn't feel like there was anywhere to turn, which is why I'm so hell-bent on making sure that people that need it have somewhere to turn.
Because of his experience, Ryan is now helping young people deal with their grief, and using nature and his boat are just some of the ways that he does it.
People go home from a funeral, and if it's not a relative or not someone really close, they take their suit off, they take their black clothes off, and it's almost like they take their grief off. But for the family, they're still in it. But that's when probably they need the support the most, and it's when people take a back seat and they take a step away.
It's quite a lot of expectations, isn't
Massively.
there, around grief and how you're supposed to be sad about somebody dying.
Yeah, we think that people go through these 5 stages
process
of
of
denial,
stages of grief,
and do you know what? Those books and those theories are written because a lot of that stuff's true, in that those are the things you are going to feel. But you don't spend 2 weeks at stage 1, you don't spend 5 months at stage 2. There's no kind of script to follow.
Okay, so many people have probably heard of the 5 stages of grief. It's been around since 1969. Here's me and some wooden posts to try and explain it. There's denial, anger, here we are, here at anger, yep, lovely. Bargaining, that's the what ifs and the if onlys. Depression, yep, number 4. And acceptance, finally.
I think a lot of people have a lot of those feelings, but not in the order that they say in the textbooks.
Right, so because human emotions don't really work in stages, maybe grief is a little bit more like this. Different feelings at different times for different people. That looks a little bit more like it.
You're not over it yet? Well, when are you going to get over it? It's not like that. It's not something you get over. But if you love someone, how are you ever going to find a way that you wake up a day and you don't miss them?
His favourite band was AC/DC, and he always would listen to that, and I would still know every word to all of their songs. Yeah.
This is Charlotte and Rosie. Their dad died 4 years ago.
It feels like 4 years isn't enough, like it feels like it was yesterday that we were told. And then other days, when I miss him a lot more, it feels like it's been 400 years.
Some things will remind me, and it's 4 years later, I'm like, how can that possibly have never happened in 4 years, but has happened now, and makes me feel just as sad as it did when it first happened.
Half of the issue with bereavement is that it's not just what's happened then, it's the things in life that are going to happen that they don't get to be a part of. It's the teenage girl who in the back of her head knows that because Dad's died he's never going to get to walk her down the aisle. It's the 40-year-old bloke who's never going to get to go down the pub and wet the baby's head with his dad, and his dad's going to say, well, what I did the day you were born is this. And it's not fair, and it's you feel robbed, and you feel an injustice until you realise there's millions of other people in the same boat.
So far, we've talked about the very painful but normal grief that most of us will experience, the type of grief that your life grows around. But when can grief become a problem?
A complicated grief basically is when somebody has got completely stuck, and it may be because their social network has dissolved with the person who's died. It could be that they relied on their partner for everything and now had nothing left. It could be that they do already have a depression and anxiety that becomes worse as a result, and therefore lead to a more complicated outcome.
As always, we want to know your advice, the ways you've coped with somebody dying. If you fancy it, share your comments below. Thanks, guys. So grief is inevitable and really, really individual. But what are some of the ways you can try to cope with it?
If you feel sad, then let yourself feel sad. Don't bottle it up.
Go to see your GP, talk to your friends, talk to your parents, just find somebody to talk to.
What if you can't even talk?
When I'm working with children, one of the things I would do, they don't know what their feelings are about normally, but they just know that they're not okay. So I do a traffic light system, paint some stones red, orange and green, and if you feel fine, put the green stone by the kettle so that mum or dad can find it. If you don't feel fine, put the red stone by the kettle, and then at least mum or dad can say, "Are you all right? What's happening? How are you feeling?"
That's brilliant. I think we should all use that.
The things that happen in the now and in the future and in the past, they shape your every step coming forward. You have that footprint that is left, and it's what you choose to do with it.
What sort of things are really normal about grief that we just don't talk about?
Talking to the person who's died is a really important one. Wearing some of their clothes, wanting to wear their perfume, touching a photograph, kissing a photograph.
Whether it's going to Zumba or whether it's kind of going out with your friends or just taking a stroll, going for a walk with a dog, things like that, you can get to a point where it becomes manageable and it becomes livable, and it's not the first thing you think of when you wake up in the morning.
Every person is an individual, and even us sitting here and telling us the memories we have of our dad and how we felt, it doesn't mean that you're going to feel that way or that you did feel that way, because everybody is different.